How to Train Your Dragon is the latest live-action remake, a first though for Universal, where we are again telling the story of Hiccup and Toothless, two characters on opposite sides of a war, having to come together to become friends. And that's all. Pretty much any spoilers to you guys. This will be a spoiler-free review. How to Train Your Dragon. I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I thought it would be years before we got to this exact point. And the point I'm talking about exactly is 3D animated movies getting the live action treatment. We've known for the longest time that Disney has been milking the live action trend with a lot of their classics, but they're really starting to run out, and other studios are taking note how easy moneymakers they are, even if the quality isn't up to par. Dedicated movie fans in the space are now very harsh on live action remakes, but general audiences that outnumber us a lot love just seeing something that was once animated turn live action, and they'll happily spend the money for it. So it was no surprise that Universal had finally decided to dip their toes into this same market, and I really didn't know what to expect. All the trailers seemed to be very faithful to the animated counterpart. Not much of a design change was made to Toothless. Mason Thames' Hiccup looked alright. Honestly, the thing that intrigued me the most with this live action remake is how different a studio can be compared to Disney. And since these live action remakes are not going to stop, maybe this healthy competition of another studio doing live action remakes better could motivate Disney to do a little better job with theirs. All this to say though, went in, not sure where my expectations were. Of course, I love the animated movie, and I consider myself a little bit more friendly to these live action remakes because I know some people get enjoyment out of them, and I don't want to completely party poop on their parade. And having walked out of the movie, man, people are gonna love this, and I think it's gonna make a lot of money. And when I say people are gonna love it, I truly mean general audiences are gonna eat this movie up, because it's literally the exact movie you got, with just the littlest amount of new stuff to kind of try and make it its own, but not stray too far from the original material that you feel alienated to it. And you know, it's so funny trying to review these live action movies, because if I'm being honest with you, I could easily say, movie's amazing. This thing was awesome. I love the story. I love the characters, the sequences they had, but all of that is also true for the animated counterpart. And that's where I get into the struggle of like, how do I go about reviewing this? Because a lot of the people will argue, Chris, if you compare it to the original, well, of course, you're going to be negative on it. You're going to be nitpicky, review it as its own thing. The How to Train Your Dragon movie is one of those occasions where it's so much a shot for shot remake of its original counterpart. It's kind of really hard to also just review it as its own thing. But trying to do my best on focusing on the live action elements, because once again, no point telling you how amazing the story of this movie is, the great moments you have between the characters, because that's all stuff you know from the animated movie. I think Mason Thames as Hiccup was a really nice rendition. I was very happy that he didn't try to do an exact imitation of voice actor Jay Baruchel, because no offense to that actor, that voice can get on my nerves. But Mason Thames was able to still find the dorky, quirky, fumbly side of Hiccup while still making it his own and not falling into that voice trap. Nico Parker, who plays Astrid in the movie, I thought also did a good job. In fact, I would even be willing to say the live action version kind of develops the relationship between Hiccup and Astrid slightly better. There's more of a tense situation going on between them, and they add this story beat that Astrid is actually not fond of Hiccup because he's the son of the chief, thus he has privilege in the town. Little things like that I thought help ground it and make it its own. And really all of the live action cast members I feel are perfectly cast. I know Gerard Butler plays his voice counterpart here in live action. Of course he does a good job, but the trio of friends in Dragon Training and Nick Frost as Gobber all really fit the world. One thing I also liked is I was very fond of the atmosphere that they have built up in here. Sometimes with these live action remakes, they are actually held back by what they could do visually, because in animation, so much more is possible. So much more can be lively, vibrant, thus making for better visuals. And while I'm not going to say the How to Train Your Dragon movie has any visuals better than the animated film, they at least do their best. And I think seeing a lot of these dragons, this village, the arenas, and even that final act with the dragon's nest all of the scale and the look of it, I thought was actually really fun and inviting to see in live action form. To me, that is one of the funner parts of a live action movie, is seeing sometimes that action translated. And I thought the How to Train Your Dragon movie does handle those moments well, whether Hiccup is soaring on top of Toothless. The flying sequences at times I felt were very majestic and help with those emotional beats. I think a lot of that is also in part to the CGI in this movie looking really great. Of course, there's a couple of wonky moments or situations where characters feel a little more digital than they are, but for the most part, I was really blown away by the effects in this movie and thought it complemented the world nicely. I know I might regret saying this because I never want anything to replace animation, because animation gets enough scrutiny or belittling by general audiences just because they think live action is a superior format to tell stories. And even after this movie, while I think there's still yet a live action adaptation that can replace the original film, there were moments when I was watching this towards the ending and I just found myself really enjoying the story, the characters, everything was falling into place, that I thought if someone had watched this over the animated movie, they would still get really close to capturing everything that was special about that first film. While I still recommend that be the priority and the thing you check out, there are a lot of other live action animated adaptations where I'm like, no, you are doing yourself a giant disservice if that is the version that you're going to be sticking to and watching first. But again, I don't know how much of that is a compliment and more of the movie just playing it safe with just doing the beats by beats. And I realize that's a real catch-22 situation, right? You either tell the story exactly as it is and get called lazy and an instant cash grab, or you add too much new stuff, alienate yourself from the story, and then get giant backlash from fans going, what was the point of remaking it? Really, there's never a happy ground with these live action remakes, but I did find myself quite enjoying How to Train Your Dragon. I am iffy though on whether I'd want them to do the whole trilogy, because like I said, I still think the way the animated films did best, if they're following the same formula they did with this, with copying the exact story with just slight minute different details, I don't know if you really justify your existence other than just, whoa, that's what Hiccup would look like in real life. Pretty cool. If I really had to get on though on some negatives that, like I said, hold this movie back and keep the original film superior, is the first, I want to say 40 minutes of the movie, it did feel really strange because it's such a shot-for-shot remake that it's following the pace and rhythm of its animated counterpart, and that translating to live action was really wonky, down to the narrating, to what was going on. It's like you could tell the beats weren't hitting. It isn't really until Toothless and Hiccup start interacting, having their bond, that the movie really soars and takes off, and you also grow accustomed to a live action movie following the rhythm of an animated film. But again, like I said, I think enough people are going to come out extremely happy with this. It's the most safest version you could be because you are just translating that already amazing movie. Part of me wonders if maybe this is what they should just be, because it's not really much to offend or get upset about. Like, I thought the Lilo and Stitch movie was perfectly fine, and for Disney quality, that was one of their better live action remakes, and that got insane amount of hate for its ending and changes it made. I think some people were even going as far as to twist the ending into something evil. Maybe How to Train Your Dragon is doing it right. We're just, how about just add one or two new things and keep everything else exactly the same. So when it comes to live action How to Train Your Dragon movie, I'm gonna give action 3.5 stars. In live action form, I actually really did like the look of the dragons. The flying sequences I did find kind of majestic, and that big battle at the end with the scale and scope did feel kind of grand in live action. Coming to the movie, I'm gonna give it 2.5 stars. I do think a bit of the humor is lost in live action form. There were just things I found funnier in the animated movie than in live action, but that could also be because a lot of the jokes from the animated movie are repeated a second time here, so it's just not funny hearing the same joke twice. Drama in the movie, this is really tough because the How to Train Your Dragon story is easily like a 4-star movie for me, but because you can kind of tell that sometimes it's just hitting the beats and repeating a story out there while trying to keep the same rhythm of the animated form instead of for live action, it brings it down to like a 3.5 star. But of course, I love the How to Train Your Dragon story. Horror in the film, I'll give half a star too. Since it is a kids movie, there is one scene where Toothless just roars on screen, and I thought that was actually pretty frightening for some kids. And suspense the movie, I'm gonna give it 2 stars because you're familiar with this story. It does take away some of that suspense. Casual moviegoers, I'm gonna give this an A+. Like, they knocked it out of the park for them. Cinephiles, I'm gonna give it a B+. And critically, I'm going to give it a B-. For the live action How to Train Your Dragon movie, it plays it perfectly safe in copying an amazing film. Thus, it's kind of hard not to deliver an already amazing movie that I think is worth watching in theaters. Again, that's just my opinion on the movie, guys. If you are someone that likes seeing something translated over, I think the CGI and how safe it plays it, I think is going to keep most people happy. But I toss it off to you guys. How do you feel about the live action How to Train Your Dragon? And are you happy with this 3D animated trend turn live action now? Who's next? Toy Story? Shrek? Kung Fu Panda's around the corner. I can feel it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.